Solomon was denied the Medal of Honor due to a rule in the Geneva Convention that no medical officer can bear arms against an enemy, despite multiple recommendations.
Most epic deaths in history.
Today, we're going over the most epic deaths in human history. Number 1, Benkei. We're starting this video off with a story of the
Is this educational? Oh, nah, bruh.
greatest wingman in human history. It's a dark night in 12th century Japan, and a Buddhist monk named Benkei is wandering the streets of Kyoto. With an abundance of temples dotting the city, monks are a common sight, but this guy is different. At 6'6", he towers over everyone around him, and he's carrying a weapon. A cross between a sword
He's like
and a
1
long
inch
spear
smaller than
called
me.
a naginata. His face gives off the vibes of someone on a hunt more than someone seeking enlightenment. And it turns out he was out hunting that night for his final victim. See, Benkei was actually a Sohei, a warrior monk trained and battle-hardened in combat. Through his encounters with samurai, he's decided that they
Wait, chat, would y'all rather be a samurai or a ninja?
Worthy of their status.
I'd rather be a ninja.
The world would be a better place with less of them around, and this led him on a bloody quest to duel and defeat 1,000 samurai, collecting their blades as trophies after each victory. At this point, he had collected 999 swords and was out that night looking for his final duel. While walking near Goto Tenjin Shrine, Benkei hears the sound of a flute, and when looking to see who is playing it, he finds a small, thin samurai. Around the man's waist is a beautiful gilded katana, the perfect piece to finalize
I'm not
Benkei's sword
7'6", I'm
collection.
6'7" and 3/4.
Immediately
Samurais are
the
also
samurai to a
ninjas.
duel. The small man puts away his flute, and surprisingly, he agrees to fight. The two men walk together to Gojo Bridge and draw their weapons. Full of confidence, Benkei rushes in, but despite towering over the samurai, Benkei is swiftly defeated. Instead of taking his life, the samurai just turns and walks away. Benkei is shocked and left in disbelief. In the following days, these unfamiliar feelings turn to anger and frustration. How could he lose to this tiny samurai? He had defeated much larger men in the past. He decides to stalk the grounds of Kiyomizu-dera Temple, waiting for the samurai to appear so he could take his revenge. Eventually, the samurai does show up, and Benkei immediately challenges him to another duel, a fight that Benkei loses again. Humiliated, he bows in defeat and tells this samurai that he'll abandon his life as a monk and instead follow him as one of his retainers. The samurai, who turns out to be Minamoto no Yoshitsune of the legendary Minamoto.
Did he just cast a spell on me?
Benkei joins him on his adventures, and the two become inseparable. They go on
They're
to
best
join
buds?
Yoshitsune's half-brothers and fight in the Genpei War against the powerful Taira, a clan that had killed Yoshitsune's father when he was just a baby. After 5 years of fighting, the Minamoto
You're a dirty... What? Anyways, bye. You can't just...
clan emerges victorious, and one of Yoshitsune's half-brothers, Yoritomo,
Stop talking and listen to the video. I am.
The end of the Genpei War had an unintended
That's
consequence.
what all y'all look like, by the
Without
way.
enemy, jealousy and suspicion soon turn the brothers against each other, and Yoshitsune and Benkei find themselves on the run, being pursued by Yoritomo and his men.
What do you
They
mean
eventually
real?
find protection under another clan called the Fujiwara, and the pairs
You post
spend
all
a
your
few
streams
years
on
in
Tasee
relative
Live?
peace in their domain. This
No,
ultimately
just
did
like
not last,
videos
as with a lot of
and
pressure and
clips.
probably a lot of bribes, Yoritomo finally
Like
convinces
segments.
the Fujiwara to turn on his brother. Fujiwara no Hidehira, the man who was once their protector, betrays them, and on June 15th, 1189, at the Battle of Koromogawa, Yoshitsune and Benkei find themselves trapped and outnumbered 5-1, with 500 of Fujiwara's men surrounding their castle position.
Wait, what are they gonna do?
The forces clash, and Yoshitsune's men put up a heroic effort. Benkei in particular is a demon on the battlefield, crushing enemies who are on average more than a foot shorter than him. But despite their best efforts, Yoshitsune's men quickly begin to fall. With just a
We're gonna see
handful
your
of
old
retainers
streams.
remaining,
If you go to my YouTube channel and you go to live and you can scroll down to all the whatever stream you want.
Yoshitsune realizes the battle is already lost. He turns to Benkei and tells him he plans to commit seppuku within the castle. He'll need time to prepare, and Benkei understands the assignment. He walks to the bridge that serves as the only
Real
entrance
eagles
to the
really
castle
enjoy
and
anything
stands alone
long.
against
That's not how you spell
Fujiwara's
real, by the
army.
way. I pissed
Fujiwara signals
myself.
a charge, and wave after wave of his men charge Benkei. He cuts them down one after another. No man can make it past him. In some stories, he's said to have single-handedly slain 300 soldiers on that bridge.
By himself?
Benkei stands stoically behind a pile of deceased Fujiwara warriors, beckoning more men to cross. And despite orders to do so, none of the Fujiwara's men answer his call. They all know that stepping on the bridge was a death sentence. Fujiwara, realizing his men are now too afraid to attack Benkei head-on, calls in his archers. They'll take him out from a distance instead.
Oh, that's cheating.
The archers let loose a barrage of arrows that find their mark in Benkei's chest. But nothing happens. Benkei doesn't flinch. They let loose another volley of arrows, but still nothing changes. Benkei's body is now a pincushion of arrows, but is still standing.
He don't even care!
Time passes, and both sides stare at each other across the bridge. Nobody dares to make the first move. Finally, Fujiwara orders some of his men onto the bridge, and they reluctantly do as they're told. As they slowly approach Benkei, he makes no motion to ready himself. They creep closer, and when they finally reach the massive monk, they discover that while he was still standing, he was already dead. Benkei, knowing he needed to buy as much time for his master as possible, had positioned himself to be supported by his spear even if he was no longer alive.
Dang!
In his last stand, he showed
what
no
a real
pain
one!
or emotion while being hit with countless arrows, all to give the illusion that he was ready to fight anyone who dared to cross. Because of his final actions, Yoshitsune had enough time to commit the seppuku ritual properly, maintaining his honor. What a wingman! Number 2, Yi-Sun Shin. The end of the 16th century in Korea was
Wait, he was low-key aura farming? Nah, wait, that was tough. That was actually tough.
strange
W
mix of
death.
insane political corruption and relative peace for its people.
Who's
Korea
this,
was a
Yunsen?
loyal tribute state to China. and
Samsung?
the Ming Dynasty pretty much left them alone.
Wait, he has a
To
phone?
the east, the Japanese were busy killing each other in the Sengoku Jidai, so they weren't a problem either. Aside from those pesky Jurchens who were constantly invading from the north, the rest
This
of
vid
Korea
ain't fire,
was
bro. I
pretty
don't know what you're
boring
talking
and
about.
uneventful with no major threats. The boring, no-wars way of life led to many men choosing to pursue careers as scholars and government officials, as it was now the best way to gain power and influence. This led to
Rather than
bloated
being a
and
man with a
corrupt political
sword.
class and an extremely
See,
weak
that's what happened. That's when humanity went wrong, bruh. Is when the people with the sword lost their power. How does that happen, huh? 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 Girls be like, I want to die peacefully, but men want to die in an epic way. It's truly beautiful.
military led by generals who had never seen real
This
combat.
video is ass.
This combination of governmental corruption and a weak military would end up causing all kinds of problems in 1590 when Hideyoshi Toyotomi fulfilled the dreams of his former lord Oda Nobunaga and reunified Japan, bringing an end to the Sengoku Jidai.
What was that?
The Japanese, for the first time in over 100 years,
Why does he
were
look
not
like
at
that?
war with each other. And if they weren't busy fighting each other, who are they going to fight now?
Wait, China's gonna
Oh.
fight to China?
Hey, before you brutally invade Korea and stuff, can I ask you, how many spam emails or texts do you get a day? I think you need to check out Incogni. See, anytime you
Oh
save
my-
data photo your name, but delete your information, known data on record. You won't scammers use the what an awesome expects the Koreans to help him or else. Now remember, Korea was basically like the Puerto Rico of China in this era, so they couldn't really help Japan conquer it. Not like they wanted to anyway.
Alright,
They
word.
thought the Japanese were primitive barbarians.
How'd he die?
Plus, those idiots don't even know how to sail anyway. Ha. Oh.
And they're sailing.
In 1592, hundreds of
Tasee
Japanese
head
ships are
game.
spotted off the coast of Busan.
Shout out Tassie's little sister with the 3-piece of a super sticker. Thank you.
This is no trading expedition.
Shout out, bro.
This is an invasion.
Thank you.
Seeing the massive Japanese fleet, two of Korea's
Appreciate it,
top
bro.
admirals freak out and
Hell
sink
yeah.
their own ships so they won't have to fight the Japanese.
They sunk
And
their
just
own
like
ship?
that, half of Korea's naval fleet is gone. The Japanese soldiers land in Busan
Woj?
unopposed and immediately begin conquering forts and cities on their march to Seoul.
So how'd he
The
die?
Korean military is no match for Toyotomi's men, who were all veterans of a 100-year war. Korean casualties are huge. The Japanese are ruthless and leave few survivors. Within 3 weeks, they've marched to and conquered Seoul. A few weeks later, they take Pyongyang and are at China's doorstep. The fall of Korea
Dang,
seems
they're really
inevitable.
taking over the place.
But when all hope
do you
seemed
mean, what
lost,
the hell?
a man determined to defend his homeland and drive
My
out
head-
these barbarian
what?
invaders rose to the occasion. A man who quite possibly was the greatest admiral to ever live. His name was Yi-Sun Shin. So
Yi-Sun
Yi-Sun
Shin.
Shin's story is pretty interesting because
That's actually
unlike
a fire
most heroes,
name.
he wasn't necessarily liked by
Yo, I wish as an American that I had some tough name like a Japanese or a Chinese name, bro. Am I the only one that thinks this? Like every Japanese, Chinese name has aura behind it. Yeah, but you don't. Like,
the elites at the time. In fact, they kind of hated him, but for all the wrong reasons. Basically, early in his military career, he was so good at inspiring his men and leading them to victory that he made everyone around him look bad by comparison. Remember, corruption was a big problem during this time. So out of jealousy,
my middle name is Sessa Normahora? Hell yeah, that has aura. Yeah, your name is...
falsely accuses Yi of deserting the army in battle, and the king believes it.
Your
He
name
strips
sucks.
Yi
No,
of his
it
rank,
don't,
has him
bruh.
thrown in prison and tortured.
It don't.
This experience would probably make most men quit the military altogether, but Yi was
Calvin?
eventually released, and he managed to climb his way back through the ranks to commanding a small fleet of ships by the start of the Japanese invasion. Now, despite the fact the Koreans were absolute trash at fighting at the start of this war, they did have one huge advantage over the Japanese. They'd been dealing with Woko pirates along the coast for years, and because of this, they had developed ships called Panoksun.
Can we
a
not
limited
bully
turtle
me
ship that
right
was
now?
specifically designed to
Had to
combat
wait
Japanese
9
naval
months to be
tactics.
named Tyler.
See, the Japanese weren't used to fighting at sea, so they basically
Notice
stuck
how
to
none
what
of
they
y'all
were
are
good at,
showing your real
close-range
names, by the
combat.
way? I'm
Their
just saying.
strategy consisted of shooting at
I'm
people
just
with their
saying.
rifles and boarding other ships.
None of y'all
and
are telling
engaging
us
them
your
with
real
swords and
names.
spears. Their ships were more like transport
I'm just
vessels rather
saying.
than battleships. The Panoksun, on the other hand, was a floating fortress armed with cannons and was built in a way that made boardings impossible. These ships were a huge reason why Admiral Yi was able to have so much of his success.
Chat, would y'all rather be a samurai, a ninja, or a pirate?
Basically the only advantage the Koreans have. And they already sank over half of them themselves.
I got a
Anyways,
real unknown
Admiral Yi
name.
was not a
Buddy, I
coward
know
like the
your
other two
name.
admirals, and instead of sinking his ships, he
means
rushed
gonna
his fleet
scream
of
it
34
tonight.
ships
What?
first towards the Japanese and began
A
attacking
ninja?
them along the coast. His
Yeah, but a
capabilities
pirate would be
as a
awesome,
naval
too,
commander
though.
are obvious right from the start.
Samurai?
In just a few weeks, using tactics to bait the Japanese to sail into
I think-
vulnerable
oh.
positions, he single-handedly sinks over 200 Japanese ships with no losses of his own.
Why is
In
Remy
battle
falling
after
for this?
battle, he is vastly outnumbered, yet
Fuck-ass
sails away
pirate.
victorious every single time. Yi
Yo,
is the
bro.
sparkling piece of glitter embedded in the turd that is the Korean military. And by the end of the year, he had sunk 350 Japanese ships. Along with the help
350!
of Chinese reinforcements, allowed the Koreans to drive the Japanese soldiers all the way back to Busan. And by the end of the year, the war entered somewhat of a stalemate, with the Chinese
get a
and
ninja
Japanese
star?
trying to
That
negotiate
is
a
true.
peace deal. So things are going pretty good for Yi. But remember the two admirals who sunk their own ships at the beginning of the war?
Yeah, I remember
well,
that.
one of them, named Won Gyeon, is insanely jealous of Yi's success. So jealous,
Well, that's what you
he
get,
starts
bruh.
talking shit about Yi to the king
Imagine.
every day. And when peace talks with China fail and Toyotomi begins a second invasion of Korea
Could it be
in
me?
1597, Gyeon and other government officials frame Admiral Yi as a traitor, and the king agrees. For the second time in his career, Yi is stripped of his rank and sent back to prison where he is brutally tortured again. He's set to be executed. but
I'm
the
not
king
watching
doesn't
my
change of
great,
heart,
great,
and he
great,
instead
great,
sends Yi
great
back to fight as a common
ancestors.
soldier, a humiliation worse than death. With Yi out of the picture,
Great.
Won Gyeon is put in charge of the Korean fleet. And as you may have guessed by now, he was pretty terrible at his job. He drank heavily, made poor decisions, and disrespected his men. Many of Yi's commanders refused to fight under such a downgrade. And what made
Yay?
things even worse for Gyeon was that during the stalemate, the Japanese who had watched Admiral Yi wreck
Awesome.
their over and over again had actually learned how to fight at sea. Their new ships now had cannons, and they began to use the same strategies Admiral Yi had used against them.
What?
This all comes to a head in the Battle of Chilcheoliang, Gyeon's first attempt to attack the Japanese fleet. With 200 ships and the best of Admiral Yi's men, Gyeon sails out to confront the Japanese, and he immediately falls into a trap. A trap
we
they had
end the
learned from
video?
fighting against Yi. The entire Korean Navy is
It's almost
decimated,
done.
and Gyeon is last seen being chopped to bits by Japanese soldiers while trying to run away. The king, realizing he may have messed up, reinstates
R.I.P..
Yi Sun-shin as fleet admiral, and he takes command of the pathetic remains of the once undefeated Korean Navy. He's
Dang.
left with just 13 ships and a few hundred demoralized men. In the following battle, outnumbered 25-1, using superior strategy, Yi manages to sink 31 of the 333 Japanese ships, again without
Dang.
losing a single ship of his own. This victory gives
31?
Yi time to rebuild his
That's a
navy, but
lot.
not gonna lie, things still look pretty grim for the Koreans. But the next year, Hideyoshi Toyotomi becomes ill and dies, his last official order being to withdraw the Japanese
Out
army
of
from
nowhere?
Korea back to Japan. Yi sees this as the time to finally drive the Japanese out of Korea for good.
What's up,
and launch
Lily?
a final offensive against the retreating Japanese forces. At the decisive Battle of Noryang, Yi takes his position at the top of his flagship with his son and nephew and begins beating a war drum to push his allied Korean and Chinese fleet forward. Admiral Yi's ship
What?
leads the charge, and he personally takes out 10 Japanese ships. The Japanese are in full retreat, and Yi beats his drum with intensity. Victory is within his
What happened to
grasp.
Yi, pal?
After 7 long years, Korea will finally be free of these invaders. But suddenly, he's hit in his armpit by a Japanese musket ball. He realizes the wound is fatal, and he turns to his son and nephew and says, "The war is at its height. Wear my armor and beat my war drums. Do not announce my death." His son and nephew quickly carry his body below deck, and his nephew, dressed in Yi's armor, quickly returns to the admiral's position and resumes beating the drum.
Hey!
Yi's men continue to fight, and the Koreans drive the Japanese out of Korea for good. Undefeated in battle, Yi dies below deck, listening to the sound of his drum, knowing that his homeland was finally free. Number 3. Ben L. Salomon.
What? Another one?
We generally cover stories from more ancient times on this channel, but this story from World War II undeniably belongs on this list. This is the last stand of a dentist turned field medic who took out 98 Japanese soldiers before falling to his own wounds.
98?
Ben L. Salomon was drafted into the United States Army in 1940, just 3 years after he graduated from the USC
First
Dental
overall?
School. Salomon proved to be a model soldier and showed himself to be very skilled with both rifle and pistol.
At the same time? Wait, this guy might be him.
And then to captain in 1944, serving as a regimental dental officer of the 105th Infantry Regiment.
He's a demon?
In June
I
of
looked back,
1944,
found out the game was called Dream Corps.
were deployed into active combat in Saipan. The fighting in the Pacific was infamously bloody. Casualties on the island were extremely high, and with so many soldiers having much more pressing issues than a root canal, Salomon volunteered to replace the 2nd Battalion's field surgeon who had been wounded. By July, both the Americans and the Japanese had suffered heavy casualties, and the remaining Japanese troops on the island came to the realization that there was no path to victory. They decided on a final banzai charge, a mission with the sole goal of killing as many American soldiers as possible with no plan of returning. Early in the morning of July 7, 1944, the remaining 4,000 Japanese soldiers began their final attack. Salomon's field tent was positioned just 50 yards behind the front foxholes.
So he was really just going ham.
His tent quickly filled with over 30 injured troops. He did his best to tend to the wounded, but the Japanese soon broke through the front lines. He looked out of his tent and spotted a Japanese soldier bayoneting a wounded American who was lying outside of the tent. Enraged, Salomon picked up the rifle of one of his patients and fired at the Japanese soldier, killing him. Suddenly, 2 more Japanese soldiers popped into Salomon's tent and fired on them, taking them out as well. Like zombies, 4 more enemy soldiers then crawled into the tent from the sides, and Salomon took 2 out with his rifle and another with his bayonet. He hit the 4th soldier in the stomach with the butt of his gun, and a wounded soldier he had been treating finished him off. Realizing the situation was only getting worse, Salomon instructed his medics to evacuate all of the wounded men. He would stay behind to give them cover so they could retreat. Salomon grabbed a rifle and joined the front lines. When he saw 4 men manning a machine gun fall to enemy fire, he rushed to the gun and manned it himself. Bang, bang! Burst into the charging Japanese soldiers. He continued to fight from that position until he was eventually overrun by enemy soldiers. Days later, when the Americans returned to the battlefield, Salomon...
Stop, bruh! Dude, this is why I hate blurps, bruh.
Gun.
I'm trying to watch.
98 Americans returned to the battlefield. Salomon's body was found slumped over the machine gun, with 98 dead Japanese soldiers piled in front of him. His body was ravaged with 76 bullet holes and many 76! Wounds, 24 of which he may have suffered before actually dying. The blood trail on the ground showed that Salomon had repositioned the machine gun multiple times while mortally wounded. Despite saving many lives that day, Salomon was denied the Medal of Honor due to a rule in the Geneva Convention that no medical officer can bear arms against an enemy. Despite multiple recommendations from generals throughout the years, he remained a footnote in history until 2002, when Salomon was finally...
What? Bend the rule then! What? Yo! What? I don't care if he got the Medal of Honor, bruh. He should have got every single medal in the history of history, bruh. He just killed 76 people with a machine gun, man. Damn, bruh. I ain't gonna listen to